Hey guys, this is John, and welcome to another Climbing the Rating Ladder video. I'm playing a high-rated player here, CGCHV, and we have a Sicilian. I think I'm going to go open Sicilian. Now, I usually recommend Alapin, but I'm going to stick with my main repertoire. I actually had another game with this exact same line recently in my standard series. Okay, this time we see the Kalashnikov, though. So let's go knight b5. This is the only theoretically strong move here. Yeah, d6. I think I'll probably play knight 1 to c3. You can also play c4 and try to gain a grip on the d5 square, but let's go ahead with this. We could have a Sveshnikov transposition, or black can keep it in Kalashnikov waters with b5 here. Try to delay knight f6, but black goes knight f6. Okay, and bishop g5 would be normal. Just thinking if I want to do anything else, like knight c4 right away. But I think knight c4 is premature. b5, knight e3, and then b4. Making sure my setup's good. Okay. Yeah, so this is a 10-minute game with no increment, and I'm facing an opponent who could definitely take me down, especially if I'm not playing my A game. So let's tread cautiously, shall we? And try to make it instructive still. Okay, bishop e7. So black is withholding this b5 move, and I kind of think that's a mistake, because normally white doesn't get an option to play knight c4, which I may avail myself of here. Knight c4, b5, then bishop takes f6, I'm thinking. Insert this trade. So yeah, let's go ahead and do this. Now, without increment, I got to make a point to move faster in the opening and early middle game. So black does hit me with this. But now when I play this in-between move, bishop takes f6, this disrupts the sequence. I feel like I'm going to get a nice grip on the position here, folks, because knight e3, and there's these glaring weaknesses on d5 and f5 that black rather casually took on. Usually you're not going to play your bishop to e7 if you accept this structure. There are lines of the Sveshnikov where this happens, but the bishop usually goes here. So I kind of think this bishop on e7 should be a liability. All right, knight d4. I'm probably going to jump the knight into the center. This knight on c3, that is. Yeah, let's play it. Looking for pawn c3. I want to kick black's knight out of this strong d4 square. Notice how I have my knight backed up. I love the fact that the knight on e3 supports the knight on d5. I can imagine we're going to get to some good knight versus bad bishop scenarios in the future. If I can hinder black playing f5, that would be fantastic. Maybe black will consider it here. But okay, black plays bishop e6 instead, and I think c3 is the way to go here. Kick the knight out. Yep, let's do it. Try not to dwell too much on these moves. I have a good position. So let's just keep the momentum going. Knight c6 will likely be played. Okay, so one move that would be common here would be a4 if I want to try to stab at this pawn on b5. So I'm looking at that. I could also simply consider bishop e2, maybe bishop g4, knight f5. Some plan like that looks pretty good. What else? Yeah, a4 might not even be necessary, you know? It might be a detour, if you will. I think I'm going to go bishop e2. Because I feel this bishop is so poorly placed here. That's going to hinder black's entire avenue for counterplay, or avenues for counterplay, if there are any at this point. I really do feel like this is a pretty serious advantage for white if I play this properly. So black does castle. And now bishop g4 if I want to continue with my idea on the king side. And I might simply play bishop f5 and look to go queen h5 thereafter. I'm highly, highly, highly focused on playing on the light squares here. Let's do it. Play the bishop g4 move. Haven't even had a chance to sip my coffee yet. I was having a bit of a hard time finding a game today on chess.com for this series. So I noticed this player looking for a 10-minute game, 2101. Definitely high for climbing the rating ladder. But I think you guys enjoy seeing me play good players. So, and I welcome the challenge too. Okay, queen d7. So this puts black in forking range with knight b6. So that has to be calculated. That does win an exchange right away if I want to go for that. So that's the first thing that hits my radar here. Knight fork distance is a major tactical signal. Those of you who have read Tuning Your Chess Tactics Antenna will know that. So the only thing I'm wondering is if I am justified in playing bishop f5 and just going for the attack. Because I feel like knight b6 is probably going to be there still. And queen h5 is a pretty significant threat. If I play knight b6 and black plays bishop takes g4, I can play knight takes g4. I'll probably still get the f5 square, even in that line. So that looks pretty good. Can't imagine banking the material is a bad idea, though. Bishop f5. Yeah, I think I'm going to go knight b6, but bishop f5 also looks pretty darn tempting here. But I don't see it leading to mate in the short term. King h8, rook g8, rook g7. Black can take on f5 at some point, so I'm probably best off simply banking the material and still having a strong attack. Let's do it. Go for the fork. Take on a8. All right, so now I could consider bishop takes e6 followed by queen g4 check. In a way, though, that seems to help black because they get to shore up their position a little bit. I think I would only go for this line if I actually win a pawn. So queen g4, king f7, queen h5, but then the king goes back to, let's say, g7. Again, looks good. I'm not quite convinced that's the absolute best way to continue, so leaning towards bishop f5 here. Yeah, let's play the bishop to f5. Queen g4, big threat. If black wants to remove the bishop, then they got to give me this juicy outpost square. Any reason to... Nah, we're not going to take with the pawn. Take with the knight. So my opponent, I think, definitely should have slowed down like several moves ago and probably out of the opening because we were in standard theory, but then they delayed the b5 move. And I think had black been thinking and maybe comparing to other lines of the Sicilian, like the Sveshnikov, they might not have made that mistake. But it could just be a gap in black's knowledge. Like that's entirely possible too. Okay, bishop g7, so that covers the, or bishop f8 rather, covers the g7 square. I can throw in the check and then play queen h4. That looks pretty good. Yeah, I think I like that. Just activate the queen with tempo. There is also knight takes d6. That looks good too. That is a free pawn. I'm just kind of in love with my knight here on the f5 square. I would imagine black's going to look to trade it, though, knight e7. This could be coming. So, okay, candidates are queen g4 check followed by queen h4 or knight takes d6 right away. Probably going to play one of those moves. Queen h4, king h8, or queen g4, king h8, queen h4. Let's say bishop back to e7. I could castle kingside, rook g8. I feel like that probably should win pretty handily. Yeah, I don't think it's necessary to even go for the d6 pawn. I like my knight enough that I'm going to play for this line where I'm attacking here. Trying to be mindful of the clock. Got to keep a constant eye on that. I do like that my queen supports the e-pawn, by the way. So if black ever moves this knight, then it's nice that I don't have to worry about this. Okay, bishop g7. So again, I can take d6. This time that seems even better than before. Castling either direction also looks good. Also looks entirely strong here. Entirely possible and strong. Let's take the pawn on d6 with tempo on the queen. Queen c7. And likely just come back to f5 now. Rook d1, another option. Rook d1, though, rook d8. Yeah, so let's come back to f5. And if black wants this knight off the board, then they have to be willing to trade down in what's very likely a losing position. So knight e7. Could take the bishop or the knight. Given the time situation and the fact that the bishop remains poorly placed, I'm going to take the knight. And then I think I'll castle short. Yeah, just castle this direction. look to get on the D file. If black tries to ambush me on the G file, I don't see that working out so well. My king is safe. Bishop F8 is going to disrupt black's coordination anyways, so I think something like this should win pretty routinely. Okay, queen E6. This does hit the pawn down on A3. Could do a little tidying up here and play A3. I meant to say pawn on A2, by the way, but yeah, let's play A3. We're in the phase of the game where we just want to be vigilant, look for ways that the opponent can attempt to get back in the game. Any possible way they can do that. I think they're going to have to move their bishop to even attempt it. So bishop F8 comes to mind, but I think rook D8 is a pretty good response to that. And say, if you ever move your bishop, I'm going to trade off your rook on G8. F5, yep, also a possible move. This does open up this, so I'm thinking maybe take on F5 first, and then when black recaptures, at that point, play rook D8. Yeah, could also do it immediately. Could play rook D8 from the jump. Let's take F5. We'll capture the pawn. Do I have to worry about queen C2 at all? I wouldn't think so. So let's go here. Bishop F6, I'm taking on G8 with check. And then moving my queen. So let's deploy the rook. I'm under 2 minutes, though, with no increment. So let's, of course, continue playing fast here. We'll give a check. And maybe on the next move, queen F3, looking for a queen trade. In effect, preventing the whole queen C2 thing. I wouldn't mind a queen trade, even though my structure gets a little damaged. I'm up in exchange plus a pawn clean, so that will win. Yeah, I think queen F3 is a nice move here. Just bullying black with the possibility of a queen trade. You can wield the queen trade option as a pretty blunt instrument when you're trying to convert to a win, because it's exceedingly unlikely your opponent's going to want to trade and swap down to a hopeless endgame. So it's annoying for black, but they're going to have to play queen E6 or queen G6 here, or queen G5. There they go, queen E6. This does defend the pawn. Let's see, probably rook D1. Yeah, let's play that. Centralize. I might make a luft move around my king, H3, G3, some type of move like that. These are often somewhat close in value if you have no clear factors that can distinguish between the two that are obvious. I generally prefer to push the G pawn, just so that when king G2 is played, the king is protecting both pawns. But it also depends on what color bishop they have. You can make an argument G3 is better here because it plays against black's dark square bishop. Okay, bishop D8. Queen D5 immediately comes to mind here. Yeah, I think I'll play that. Again, using the queen trade in order to force black's queen off. Black's going to have to play queen F6 or queen E6, I think. Otherwise, this pawn on E5 will hang with check if the queen goes elsewhere. And if queen F5, I can check here, take here if I want. That does allow bishop C5 as some counterplay. Okay, queen G4. Now, this eyes up the rook, but this comes with check, so I don't foresee that being a problem. Let's go ahead and take. If F6, maybe just queen back to D5. We're not going to fall for any back rank business, I hope. Okay, and now king G8. Yeah, I can play, in the spirit of what I was talking about, a move that forces a queen trade. Queen G3. Let's pre-move the capture. Wouldn't be shocked if black resigns here. I think with a minute, they may give me enough credit to convert this, and indeed they do resign. Okay, thanks to my opponent for the game. So I think black played too quickly. You see it even at this rating level. This is a great player, 2100. There's only a small percentage of players at this level and above for rapid. So this is like a real climbing the rating ladder towards the top end. But this opening nuance, and I'll be curious about the games in the database, this opening nuance turned out to be pretty significant because I I think around here, white already has a massive advantage, possibly a winning advantage, because it's that important that black be able to play the f5 move or pivot the knight back to e7. My knight's coordinated too well in the game. Really, the toughest decisions I had to make here is between good options, knight b6 or bishop f5 or something. So I was surprised because usually the players that use this move order, the Kalashnikov, where black is withholding knight f6, they make a point to go b5 right here. In fact, I had a game against Grandmaster Alex Shabalov from 2003, I think. Big open tournament in Massachusetts in the U.S., Foxwoods. And I ended up beating him in this line. I had the white pieces, went b5, knight d5, and then I believe he played knight on g8 to e7. Knight g to e7, and then I played c4. So that b5 move is critical there. And I would be shocked if this position was acceptable for black. Strategically speaking, despite black having the two bishops, white has everything they want in this structure. They're blockading with the knight on d5, supported by the other knight, and black cannot play this f5 pawn break. Near impossible for black to do that safely. So I don't want to trivialize the rest of the game, but you guys saw it didn't seem like I had to sweat much thereafter. So let's click into the analysis. Yeah, let's go for a little game review here. You got a 93.111 accuracy to 85.2. Okay, so open Sicilian. Now, one potentially fun thing, if you're at the 2000 plus level, if you play the Sicilian as black, it's more likely your opponents, me in this case with the white pieces, would play into the open Sicilian. You'll still see a lot of sidelines or anti-Sicilians, but you won't see nearly as many bishop c4s, knight c3s, g3s, d3s, all the random stuff that white plays on move 2 in the Sicilian, or knight f3 and then bishop c4, like the delayed Bodler. You won't see as many games like that. You can actually expect to get some mainline open Sicilians. So yeah, this is the Kalashnikov variation, the Lowenthal variation, also called. Very similar to the Sveshnikov, which is knight f6, knight c3, and then e5. In some ways, you could consider the Kalashnikov a potentially more flexible version of the Sveshnikov, although white also has options, right? So if we click into the opening database here, a move that's not possible in the Sveshnikov is going c4 here, because in the Sveshnikov, white's already committed that knight there. So that is a major branch. But I opted for this knight 1 to c3 move, and then a6. Again, you can see knight f6 here. That's a direct transposition. You guys can't see that. Let me actually shrink this so you can. If black plays knight f6 here, that is a direct transposition into a Sveshnikov, with bishop g5 being the main move. You also see knight d5 played quite a bit. Fabiano played that against Magnus in one of their games in the 2018 World Championship. Actually, I think a couple games. So a6, knight a3, on the other hand, yeah, and in this position, a vast majority of the time, black plays b5. However, bishop e7 is played a fair amount. Again, keeping the kingside knight flexible. So that is a thing in this line. That's interesting. So how does this compare to what happened in the game? So let's say I go knight c4, b5, knight e3, then knight f6. Okay. So even though the bishop's on e7, yeah, interesting. So I can't as easily jump up here maybe because this pawn hangs. Black didn't take on e4 in both games to reach this position. Guess I won't go down that rabbit hole, but suffice it to say the move that black played, knight f6, it's a ways down here, 117 games, but just eyeballing the winning percentages. Yeah, 52% win rate for white, winning over half the games from this position. Then you got to take half of the draws as well. So, 15.5% of the draws added to 52. Yeah, white scoring high 60s, almost 70%. That's not a line that you want to be playing as black. And let's take a look here and see what the computer thinks about this. And again, I could play, did I play bishop g5 here? Okay, so I actually did play the move that allows a transposition to the Sveshnikov. Let me see. Okay. Yeah, maybe knight c4 directly is better. Maybe I should have gone here immediately. Much smaller sample size, but again, the percentages look pretty good. Although bishop e7, I don't know. Perhaps I'm reading into this a little too much. That eval actually doesn't differ too much. So maybe like this is the actual mistake by black, if we're being accurate here. It's not playing b5 on this move, because they still could play b5 and take this into a Sveshnikov. Yeah, and here's where we hit the transposition. Or I guess here, b5, almost always played. So we are in a Sveshnikov now, and b5 is almost always played. So I guess from my point of view, maybe this knight c4 move is the true way to attempt to punish black's move order. Although there's not so many games. But once we get here, I feel pretty comfortable saying that black needs to go b5, as in the main line of the Sveshnikov. And then white plays either knight d5 or bishop takes f6 first. So there's a line like this. If you play bishop takes f6, g takes f6, then knight d5. Notice that here, black plays f5 right away. I think this is called the Novosibirsk variation or something. There's also bishop g7, whereupon black will go f5 again pretty soon, or try to. So big difference there versus the game where black plays this bishop e7 move, allows knight c4, and just never got a chance to attack from the flank with f5. So yeah, and the computer is indicating here knight c4 is a good move. Now black plays b5, but we can throw in this in-between move, this intermezzo, Zwischenzug, whatever you want to call it. There's like 5 different terms for this type of move, where I'm deviating from the normal course where they're attacking one of my pieces. You'd expect me to move it, bring it to safety, but no, we can throw this move in first favorably. Very important to clear the d5 square. And also compels black to take with the pawn on f6, because if they take with a bishop, I can take here with check. The computer thinks this might even be a preferable option to the game. Black could also take on c4. I didn't do much calculation of this. I just saw that I can take e7 and then take on c4 if I want. Bank a pawn. Like this. Maybe I could take on g7 too. I can entertain that idea. Another way to win a pawn and still try to grab this later. So this catches black off guard and leads to the suffering that black endured in the game. So g takes f6, knight e3. Yeah, in my assessment before clicking into the analysis, because remember, we want to have some conclusions on our own before we just look at the analysis. We don't want our eyes to immediately start glazing over. We want to do some thinking ourselves. I felt like this position was already terrible for black, and the computer seems to agree. It's almost plus 2.5. Because black just lacks the counterplay that they might otherwise have in a Sveshnikov, especially associated with this f5 move to challenge the white center. So, also my knights have coordinated in an interesting way. A lot of times in the mainline Sveshnikov, so back here, if black goes b5, this knight has to take a roundabout way to get in the game. So let's say knight d5, bishop e7, bishop takes, c3. Well, I will often have to throw in this c-pawn move and then go knight c2, knight e3. I was able to omit the whole c3 thing in the game. And when I played c3 later, it came with tempo on the knight on d4. Yeah, so this in-between move set us up real well here. Black jumps in. I don't think there's a great solution here. It says castles, but I would have been more than happy to play this, or maybe bring the bishop out to one of these squares as well. Even if I don't get a direct attack against the king, black's king, a lot of these strategic middle games with the anchored knight on d5 and black being unable to play knight e7. That's the other downside of having the bishop here. No knight e7 for black. It's going to be tough to challenge that knight. So this seemed easy enough. I'm using this knight to free up for c3 and kick black's knight out of there. Yeah, wow, and this is already up to +4. I debated between a4 and just what I did in the game, bishop e2. Does look like a4 is good. Thought maybe black would play rook b8 against this. Perhaps we could have a trade and rook a6 or maybe b4 or something. I think realistically, there's lots of ways to play this position. Yeah, this does look pretty attractive too. Queen h5. But I was pretty happy with simply bishop e2. Does drop the eval a little bit, but we're still maintaining quite a healthy advantage. This a4 move, pretty common in the Sveshnikov, by the way. Common way to attack that mini structure on a6 and b5, especially when white has played c3 already. So castles, bishop g4. Okay, and the engine thinks black should go king h8 here and start trying to hide the king. I was considering bishop f5 at this point, looking for queen h5. Let's say rook g8. Again, a4, queen f3. Castles, yeah, even castles. Such nice control over these squares. And I could see myself in a few more moves or even on the next move playing a4 while black has been occupied trying to defend on the king side. Maybe we abruptly switch and we start playing on the queen side and try to prove that this pawn will be a weakness. Keeping moves like queen h5 in reserve. Always ensuring if there's a trade here, the other knight comes up, or if this knight gets captured, we take with this one, possibly even the queen. Black's really hurting on these d5 and f5 outpost squares. So bishop g4. Black instead played queen d7. I spent a little time debating here, about a minute and a half, which is a long think for a 10-0 game, no increment. So just deciding between good options. Looks like the top 3 moves of the engine are not even to go for the exchange. It does like bishop f5. I think if I had more time or an increment, I might have spent it looking at this, but I had a feeling by this stage I was winning, and I just opted to bank the material and still keep a lot of the strategic advantages. Yeah, bishop f5, queen h5 on the way. I don't think there's too much of interest after this, but hopefully the conversion was instructive for you guys. Could go knight takes d6. What does the computer think about this? I did mention this one. Yeah, also completely fine. I'd be hitting this. But I didn't think that d6 pawn was running away anywhere, and I liked the activity I was generating with the queen, forcing black to put the bishop on an awkward square again to defend the pawn. And I was able to pick up this pawn anyways. The engine's also suggesting castle's queenside or rook d1. Castle's queenside, I can see why that's strong. Black's pieces are on the queen side, so I guess instinctively I'm thinking I should bring my king this way. But realistically, the position's so winning, I have no doubt that's also decisive. Yeah, take the knight. Could take the bishop too, but nice to get that tricky piece off the board, the knight. Remember, as the time control decreases, the value of the knight increases on a practical level. That's not going to be reflected in the computer evaluation, but I do like to get rid of knights versus bishops if I have a choice when time is becoming an issue. As we all know, knights are tricky. So I do think knights have an inverse relationship to the clock in terms of their strength. Okay. So, A3. Yeah, I think this is all fine. Again, just taking care of basic threats. If black were to come down here, I could always play a rook d2 type move, get ready to double as well. Just mostly looking for trades. Also further attacking operations if I can, but very happy to make trades. I got the pair of rooks off the board. And again, queen f3. I bet the computer's not going to say this is the strongest move, but who cares? It's still good enough. If black's best here is to trade queens, I would have been very happy with that. I can win this endgame in my sleep. Rook d1, bring the rook in somewhere, attack the queenside pawns. Extra pawn. The cosmetic damage of this mini structure here is of no consequence to the result of the game. So think about that when you're ahead and queens are on the board. You can use that queen trade as an attacking weapon, essentially, because your opponent is often loath to trade queens when they know that it means just getting ground down in an endgame and losing. Yeah, and here, attacking the queen in the e5 pawn. I thought black would play queen f6 or queen f5. I think I have good options against both, but let's just say queen f6 for the sake of argument. Yeah, rook e1 looks pretty good. Attacking this again. I could see something like this occurring maybe and going after the pawn. Just got to avoid cheap shots like don't blunder bishop takes h2 and lose the queen. But don't think there's much to worry about. I could also throw in a move like G3. Never a bad move here. Again, if I have the choice between G3 or H3, I usually play G3, but it depends a bit on the pawn structure or on the pieces that remain on board. But I like G3 against this dark square bishop, further restrict it. But instead, black played queen G4. I took the pawn on E5 with check. I would have thought black would play F6, whereupon I'd probably go like queen D5. Looks like there's other moves, queen E1, yeah. Anything's fine, as long as it defends the rook. Yeah, and here, once more, rook G3. So classic moment where you can't read into the engine evaluation too much. Yeah, I can see why rook D3 is a better move. Looking for rook G3. But why even bother if I have a minute on my clock and I know queen G3 guarantees a trade of queens and a pretty easily won endgame that I can play blindfolded and probably make a lot of pre-moves along the way too. Do not sweat a drop in the evaluation of 2.5 or 3 points. Going from plus 9.5 to plus 7 is still plenty. And black resigned. All right, so I think an instructive game in terms of the opening, especially if you play Kalashnikov, Sveshnikov, even from the white side, thinking about the role of those outpost squares. And the move order mattered a lot. And I would say black had already created serious problems for themselves by the time that no more than 15 seconds or so had elapsed from their clock. So even at this rating level, you're going to get a lot of players who just play too fast. They play too fast and they try to pressure you on the clock, but there's going to be trade-offs there. I mean, it can work. I'm not saying this strategy is never going to work. Clearly, this player has got to 2100, but you got to start thinking more critically about the lines that you're playing. And if you're going to play fast, you should know the nuances of the move orders. So I think that was black's failing in this game. Thanks to my opponent for the game. This was Climbing the Rating Ladder video. One of the higher rated players I played recently in Climbing the Rating Ladder. Let me know what you guys think. Leave me a comment or two. All right. Thanks, everyone. And I'll see you later. I'll be back with another video very soon.